Deep within the whispering forest, where ancient trees stretched their branches toward the sky, a young princess named Snow White wandered all alone. For hours she walked, her feet sore and her heart heavy. The sun, like a gentle friend, sent golden ribbons of light down through the leaves, and the birds above sang soft melodies, as if trying to show her the way. Though tired and hungry, Snow White's spirit remained unbroken. Her kindness was her compass, and it led her along a winding path until she saw it, a tiny charming cottage, nestled amongst moss and wildflowers. A thin wisp of smoke curled from its chimney, and a faint warm light glowed from its windows. "Oh," she whispered, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. "Perhaps someone kind lives here." She approached the little wooden door and knocked gently. Silence. She knocked again, but still, no one answered. Hesitantly, she pushed the door open and peeked inside. Her eyes widened in wonder. Everything was so small. A tiny table stood in the center of the room, surrounded by 7 little chairs. On the table were 7 neat plates and 7 tiny cups. By the wall, 7 cozy beds were lined up in a perfect, orderly row. A soft smile touched Snow White's lips. "What dear, sweet people must live here," she thought aloud. The air smelled of freshly baked bread and warm wood smoke, and for the first time in days, a feeling of safety washed over her. Being the gentle soul she was, Snow White couldn't help but start tidying up. She hummed a quiet tune as she swept the dusty floor, wiped the little shelves, and arranged the plates back in their proper places. A pot of soup simmered on the stove, and she tasted just a tiny spoonful to soothe her hunger. It was delicious. With the cottage now neat and her belly warm, a wave of exhaustion swept over her. Her eyes grew heavy. She lay down across the small beds, which felt surprisingly comfortable together, and in moments, she was fast asleep, dreaming peacefully, as the forest outside hummed its lullaby. As dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, 7 little men marched home from their long day's work in the diamond mines. Their lanterns bobbed and twinkled like fireflies, and their cheerful songs echoed through the twilight woods. But as they reached their cottage, the first dwarf stopped, his brow furrowed. "Wait," he said, holding up a hand. "Something feels different tonight." The others gathered behind him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. They pushed open the door and stepped inside, their eyes blinking in the dim light. They all gasped at once. "Who's been sitting in my chair?" exclaimed the first, pointing a stubby finger. "And who's been eating from my plate?" cried the second, his voice full of surprise. "Someone's been drinking from my cup," murmured the third, peering into his tiny mug. One by one, they went around the room, each discovering that their things had been touched. But then, another dwarf looked around with wide eyes. "Look," he whispered in amazement. "The house is so clean. The floor has been swept, and look, the beds are made." They all stood there, scratching their heads, utterly puzzled, but also a little impressed. Cautiously, they tiptoed toward their bedroom, and there they saw her, a beautiful girl, sleeping peacefully across their little beds. Her skin was as fair as freshly fallen snow, her lips as red as a wild rose, and her hair as black as polished ebony. The dwarfs stared in absolute awe, their hearts softening at the sight. "What a lovely child," whispered one. "Shh," hushed another, placing a finger to his lips. "Let her rest. She must be lost and tired." They lit a single candle, and its golden light danced across her serene face. For a long silent moment, they simply stood there, watching her, listening to the calm, steady rhythm of her breathing. They were no longer just 7 dwarfs in an empty cottage. They were guardians of a sleeping princess. When the morning sun streamed through the window, Snow White stirred and fluttered her eyes open. For a second, a jolt of fear went through her as she saw 7 little men with long white beards watching her from the foot of the bed, but their smiles were so kind and their eyes so gentle that her fear melted away. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft as a whisper. The eldest dwarf stepped forward and gave a polite bow. "We are the 7 dwarfs," he said warmly. "And who might you be, fair maiden?" So, Snow White told them her whole story of the wicked queen, her jealous rage, her desperate escape into the dark forest, and how she stumbled upon their cozy home. The dwarfs listened with rapt attention, their expressions shifting from curiosity to sadness as they learned of her plight. "Poor dear child," said one, his voice full of sympathy. "You can stay here with us," offered another, his eyes shining with kindness. "Yes," added a third with a determined nod. "We'll keep you safe from any harm." Tears of gratitude welled in Snow White's eyes. "Oh, thank you," she whispered, her heart overflowing with relief. A cheerful energy immediately filled the small cottage. The dwarfs bustled around, showing her where to find everything. One promised to handle the cooking, another offered to fetch fresh water from the well, and the bravest one declared he would stand guard at night. The little home, once just a quiet place to rest, was now filled with laughter, the happy clinking of dishes, and the unmistakable warmth of true friendship. That evening, as they prepared supper together, Snow White began to sing. Her voice was pure and sweet, floating through the cottage like magic. Even the birds outside seemed to pause on the branches to listen. The dwarfs clapped their hands and tapped their feet, their faces alight with joy. For the first time, their home felt truly alive. Later, as the fire crackled merrily in the hearth, they gathered around, sharing stories and jokes, until their eyelids grew heavy with sleep. Finally, Snow White gently blew out the candle, plunging the room into a soft, peaceful darkness. The dwarfs each climbed into their tiny beds, smiling contentedly as they drifted off to sleep. Outside, the moon cast a silvery glow over the forest, and the stars shone like scattered diamonds above the roof of their little home. From that night on, the 7 dwarfs were no longer alone. Their cottage had found its heart, the gentle, loving heart of Snow White, who brought warmth, music, and happiness wherever she went. Thank you so much for watching this magical tale unfold. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more wonderful adventures. We love having you as part of our community. See you in the next video.